Right now, there are thousands of people out there literally hammering these heavy 18 by 24-inch metal for sale signs into their front lawns.
You're right into the dirt.
Exactly, right into the dirt. And they genuinely believe that this is, the absolute critical first step to selling their house. I mean, you sign the listing agreement, you put that clunky lockbox on the door, and then bam, that physical piece of metal goes up.
It feels official.
It really does. It feels like, okay, we are finally on the market. But the data we are unpacking today actually proves that this nostalgic piece of metal is, well, it's practically useless. In fact, it might actually be putting your most valuable asset at serious risk.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at a legacy marketing tactic that has just inexplicably survived into 2026.
Right.
Sellers are out there relying on this mechanism that was built for, an era of print newspapers and local foot traffic. It completely ignores how high net worth liquidity actually moves today.
Okay, let's unpack this because that is the exact mission for today's deep dive. For you listening, we are going to tear down this whole illusion of the yard sign.
We really need to.
We're going to look at the cold, hard math of where buyers actually come from, expose the underlying reason agents still push so hard for that sign on your lawn.
Oh, that's the best part.
Right. And then finally, we'll break down the mechanics of the hyper-targeted digital pipelines that are actually matching buyers with real estate assets today because it's not the sign.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, we need to start with the numbers here because the gap between perception and reality is just staggering.
It really is.
Every single year, the National Association of Realtors tracks the exact origin point of every home purchase. They look at the initial trigger that led the buyer to the specific asset they ultimately closed on.
Like, what actually got them in the door?
Exactly. And if you buy into traditional brokerage hype, you'd assume the yard sign is this massive primary driver. But the data tells a completely different story.
Yeah, the ceiling for that tactic is sitting at roughly 4 to 7% nationwide.
Which is wild.
It's crazy. That means, at absolute best, maybe 7 out of 100 buyers found their home because they just happened to physically walk or drive past a piece of metal on the grass.
And in those really highly competitive, fast-moving markets, I mean, think about Florida, Texas, or those major metro suburbs, that number drops even lower.
It's basically zero in those spots. Meanwhile, well over 95% of buyers are initiating their purchase through digital channels.
Right.
And I think the critical metric here is that more than half of all buyers are finding the exact specific home they end up purchasing on a screen entirely by themselves.
Yes, before they even involve an agent in the touring process.
Exactly. So, relying on a yard sign to sell a $1 million asset in 2026 is like, it's like trying to flag down a taxi in an empty desert when everyone else is just booking a rideshare on their phone.
That is a perfect way to put it. What's fascinating here is that we have to think about the actual mechanics of consumer behavior when there is serious capital on the line.
Right, because we aren't talking about buying a coffee here.
Exactly. Deploying hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into an illiquid asset requires real precision. A qualified buyer does not just get into their car on a Sunday afternoon, cruise aimlessly through a neighborhood at 15 miles per hour, and hope the perfect property magically appears behind their windshield.
No, of course not. That model assumes the buyer's timeline, their geographic presence, and their financial readiness all perfectly intersect with the exact moment they drive past your house.
Right. It relies entirely on geographic luck, which is why the modern buyer operates almost exclusively on behavioral intent rather than geographic proximity.
Yeah.
I mean, they are on their phone or their laptop, heavily filtering for highly rated school districts, calculating price per square foot ratios, evaluating tax implications.
Usually at like 11 p.m. in their pajamas.
Exactly. They're running these models late at night from their couch. That physical sign sitting out in the dark grass does absolutely nothing to intersect with that high-intent digital behavior.
But, this brings up a really glaring contradiction.
Okay, what's that?
Well, if the sign only accounts for this microscopic fraction of actual sales, and every real estate brokerage has access to this exact same industry data, why is the yard sign still the grand finale of the listing ritual? Why do they insist on planting it in your grass the minute you sign the contract?
Ah, right. Well, that's because the sign is not actually there to sell your house.
Wait, really?
Yeah, this is the quiet truth of the whole brokerage model. That 18 by 24-inch piece of metal is basically a 24/7, zero-cost billboard for the listing agent.
Wow.
It is planted on your property, sure, but it broadcasts their branding, their headshot, and their phone number to your entire neighborhood.
Okay, wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, though.
Sure, go for it.
If I am the seller, isn't local visibility still like a net positive? Even if the immediate neighbor isn't going to buy the house, maybe they have a friend from college who wants to move to the area, doesn't that local buzz create a rising tide that benefits my listing?
See, that is the exact narrative used to justify the practice.
Right.
But let's actually look at the mechanics of that so-called local buzz. When a neighbor drives past your house and sees the sign, the statistical probability that they have a highly qualified buyer in their immediate social circle who is ready to deploy capital on your specific timeline for your specific floor plan is astronomically low.
So it's basically a myth.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What actually happens is the neighbor thinks, oh, Ian's getting a whole lot of listings in this subdivision. When we're ready to downsize him 2 years, we should probably call him.
I see. So the homeowner is effectively providing free advertising real estate for the agent's future lead generation.
Precisely. And look, there is nothing inherently wrong with a business professional marketing themselves, right?
Sure, everyone has to market.
But the issue is the misalignment of the tool and just the total lack of transparency. The sign is presented to you, the seller, as this critical mechanism for asset monetization. But in reality, it's purely a mechanism for brokerage-led generation.
That is wild. Let's reframe this entirely, because when you look at a real estate transaction through the lens of, say, corporate finance, this gets even crazier.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the commission structure. If you are selling a $1.5 million property at a standard 5 or 6% commission, you are essentially handing over, what, $75,000 to $90,000.
Right around there.
In literally any other industry, if you hand a firm an $80,000 budget to market an asset, and their primary strategy is sticking a $20 piece of metal in the dirt that only serves to promote their own firm, I mean, you would fire them on the spot.
You'd run them out of the building.
Yeah.
You're acting as an angel investor funding their marketing campaign, but you aren't getting any equity in their future deals. When you view the commission as this massive liquid marketing budget, your tolerance for legacy tactics just drops to zero. You demand precision. You demand that every dollar of that margin is actually spent on elevating the value of your asset in the eyes of a qualified buyer, not just elevating the brand of the agent in the eyes of your neighbors.
That makes the financial misalignment incredibly clear. But the argument goes even deeper than just wasted budget or ineffective marketing, doesn't it?
Or way deeper.
The data suggests that putting this sign in your yard actually introduces active liabilities. We really need to talk about this concept of the looky-loo, because this fundamentally shifts the sign from being just a neutral, useless piece of metal to an active threat to the seller's privacy.
Yeah, and in 2026, privacy is premium currency. When you pound a sign into your front lawn, you are broadcasting to the entire world that a highly valuable, highly illiquid asset is in a state of transition.
You are stripping away all the friction that naturally protects you. Basically, a yard sign is an unfiltered, open invitation to your most valuable asset. It's like a nightclub firing the bouncer and just leaving the front door wide open to anyone walking by.
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
The sign invites entirely unvetted passive attention. Suddenly, you have neighbors who have absolutely no intention of buying, just sniffing around to see how you renovated your master bathroom.
Right, the nosy neighbors.
Exactly. It completely lacks any kind of filtering mechanism. A piece of metal cannot verify a pre-approval letter. It cannot check proof of funds.
No, of course not.
It can't determine if a passerby actually has the liquidity to purchase the asset, or if their moving timeline even remotely aligns with yours.
If we compare this to any other high-value transaction, it is just absurd. You would never leave a highly valuable piece of art in your front yard with a sign saying open to offers and just let anyone walking off the street come touch it.
Never.
You are essentially bypassing the bouncer, opening the vault, and inviting random foot traffic to evaluate your primary residence.
And, if the property happens to be vacant during the transition, like maybe you have already relocated to your new city, that sign goes from being a nuisance to an actual beacon.
Oh, that's a huge security risk.
It broadcasts a vacancy risk to bad actors. You are signaling that the asset is unoccupied and vulnerable, all for a marketing tactic that, statistically, won't even yield a buyer.
Right. So, okay, if we pull the sign out of the yard to protect the seller's privacy, and we acknowledge that relying on neighborhood foot traffic is just a statistically dead model, where does that $80,000 marketing budget actually go? How do we mechanically reach the high net worth buyer in today's landscape?
We have to move from physical geography to digital behavioral mapping.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the actual buyer for a premium property in, let's say, Tampa, Florida, is highly unlikely to be driving around Tampa.
Right.
They're probably sitting in an apartment in Manhattan, or they are an executive at a tech hub in Austin, Texas, or maybe they're in a suburb of Chicago mapping out a corporate relocation.
So they will literally never see the physical yard sign.
Never. Not a chance. So to capture them, the modern digital infrastructure relies on three core pillars: predictive algorithms, geofenced digital ads, and frictionless but highly vetted inquiries.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of that first one. Predictive algorithms. Because this sounds a bit like sci-fi. How does an algorithm actually know someone in Chicago is preparing to buy a house in Tampa before that person even contacts a real estate agent?
It is entirely based on behavioral data aggregation. Look, data brokers are constantly analyzing digital footprints. An algorithm isn't looking for someone who just typed, "I want to buy a house in Tampa," into a search bar.
Right, that'd be too easy.
And it's also too late in the funnel. They're looking for upstream behavioral shifts.
Give me an example of what that upstream behavior actually looks like.
Sure. Let's say a user in Chicago starts spending unusual amounts of time on highly specific local municipality websites in Hillsborough County, Florida. Then maybe they cross-reference rating systems for local high schools in that area. A week later, their IP address pings a digital calculator for interstate moving costs, and they start reading up on articles about Florida homestead exemption laws.
Oh, wow. So the algorithm correlates all those disparate data points.
Exactly. The system takes all that and assigns a highly elevated propensity to move score to that specific mobile advertising ID. The buyer hasn't spoken to a bank, they haven't called a broker.
But the data clearly indicates high intent.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. The targeting happens before the consumer even realizes they are officially in the market.
Yeah, they're just doing research, but the system knows.
Which brings us to the second pillar, geofenced digital targeting. If the algorithm identifies the intent, how does the geofence actually deliver the asset to them?
Well, geofencing allows you to draw invisible, hyper-precise digital perimeters around specific physical locations to capture device IDs.
Okay, so how does that apply to the Tampa house?
Let's say your property in Tampa is a luxury, modern build that appeals heavily to the tech sector. A sophisticated digital campaign will draw a geofence around major corporate tech campuses in Austin, Seattle, or Silicon Valley.
So anyone who physically walks onto that corporate campus with a smartphone gets tagged?
Yes, exactly. The system captures their mobile ad ID. Then it layers on that predictive algorithmic data we just talked about.
Right, to narrow it down.
It filters that massive pool of tech employees down to the specific individuals whose digital behavior suggests they are actively researching a move to Florida.
Wow. That is the laser-guided radar we talked about earlier.
It is incredibly precise. And once that highly qualified, high-intent individual is identified, you serve stunning AI-enhanced digital assets like cinematic video, interactive 3D floor plans, directly into their social feeds,
Straight to their phone.
right into their news apps and their browsing ecosystem. You put the asset in front of the exact demographic that has both the capital and the intent to execute the transaction, regardless of their physical zip code.
This completely exposes how primitive the yard sign really is. I mean, you are replacing a stationary piece of metal in the dirt with a dynamic, hyper-targeted digital net that literally follows the buyer across the country.
Exactly. And the final piece of this modern infrastructure is the frictionless inquiry.
Right, which is where we solve the whole looky-loo problem and actually protect the seller's privacy.
Yes, because when that executive in Austin sees the targeted ad for the Tampa property, the interaction is entirely digital and heavily gated.
But how does the gating mechanism work without, killing the momentum of the sale? People hate filling out forms.
It's all about balance. It requires minimal friction for the qualified buyer, but maximum friction for the unvetted stranger.
Okay.
The interested buyer taps the ad and enters a secure portal. To access the really immersive virtual tours, or the detailed property disclosures, or even to schedule a private vetted physical showing, they have to authenticate.
They are essentially passing a digital bouncer before they ever get near the physical property.
Spot on. They're logging in, verifying their identity, and in many high-end systems, they're digitally connecting proof of funds or a pre-approval status right then and there.
That is brilliant.
The seller never deals with a random knock on the door, and the property is only exposed to buyers who have mathematically proven their ability to close.
The contrast here is just undeniable. On one side, we have predictive behavioral targeting, geofenced ad delivery, and secure, authenticated digital environments.
Yep.
And on the other side, we have a heavy piece of metal staked into the grass, broadcasting your vacancy to strangers and, like, hoping a neighbor's friend happens to drive by.
Right, which naturally forces us to ask, if the data is this overwhelming and the digital tools offer this incredible level of hyper-targeted precision, why is there such deep resistance within the industry?
Yeah. Why do so many traditional agents continue to aggressively push these legacy tactics?
It's a great question.
I think it comes down to a fundamental tension between tradition and efficiency. In massive, high-stakes financial transactions, tradition dies hard because, well, tradition feels comfortable.
It does.
The seller expects to see the sign, the neighbors expect to see the sign, so the agent provides the sign to satisfy the psychological expectation of doing something, even if that something is statistically completely useless.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to realize that this comfort is incredibly expensive.
Oh, entirely.
We go back to the idea of the commission as a marketing budget. Every hour an agent spends designing print flyers, or driving out to a property to straighten a leaning yard sign, or sitting in an empty house on a Sunday hosting a public open house full of unqualified foot traffic.
Just a total waste of time.
It is. That is energy and capital being actively diverted away from the digital arena.
You are paying a massive premium for the illusion of marketing.
Exactly. The digital arena is where the match is actually being made. If your representation is obsessed with the physical artifacts of selling a house, they are fundamentally distracted from the underlying data architecture that will actually find your buyer.
Clarity of strategy is the new currency.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the most critical takeaway for you listening right now. Here's where it gets really interesting. If you are preparing to sell a property or you are managing a real estate portfolio, modern curb appeal no longer starts on a physical sidewalk. It starts on a screen.
It really does.
You must demand a sharp, data-driven digital strategy over comfortable legacy tactics.
You have to interrogate the process. Do not accept the ritual just because it is standard practice.
Right. Stop allowing your representation to burn your equity on a $20 piece of metal that basically just serves as their personal billboard. You need a team that understands mobile ad IDs, behavioral mapping, and geofence targeting.
Because the person buying your asset is highly unlikely to be walking their dog past your front lawn.
Right. They are sitting on a couch hundreds of miles away, looking at an app. So what does this all mean?
Well, it shifts the entire paradigm of how we view the mechanics of real estate. And it leaves us with a much broader, more provocative question to consider regarding all of our financial system.
No, I like the sound of that. What's the question?
Well, if the classic real estate yard sign, this universally accepted, practically unquestionable symbol of selling a home, is secretly just a localized marketing gimmick disguised as a consumer benefit.
Yeah.
It forces you to look at the rest of the financial landscape. What other ingrained standard practices in massive transactions, whether it's wealth management, insurance, or lending, are actually just legacy lead generation tools for the broker, quietly funded by the consumer?
Wow. That is a phenomenal question. It completely changes how you look at the entire infrastructure of these industries.
It really makes you think.
It does. The next time you're out in your neighborhood and you walk past one of those heavy metal for sale signs, I want you to look at it differently. Don't just see a house on the market. See it for what the data actually proves it is. A misallocation of resources, a privacy liability, and a relic of a dead marketing era.
Perfectly said.
Keep questioning the rituals, demand better data, and